My name is Eleanor Whitmore. I was 42 years old, living in Boise, Idaho, USA, when everything I thought I knew about life, faith, and the future was shattered and rebuilt at the same time. Before that day, my life looked ordinary, almost invisible. I wasn't famous, I wasn't powerful, I wasn't someone people listened to. I was just a woman trying to get through the days without falling apart. I worked as an administrative coordinator at a regional medical supply company. Paperwork, emails, schedules, deadlines, the kind of job where no one notices you unless something goes wrong. I drove the same roads every day, drank my coffee lukewarm, and told myself that routine was stability, even though deep down it felt more like numbness. I was divorced. No dramatic scandal. No betrayal headline. Just two people who slowly stopped understanding each other. We shared a son, Matthew, who was already grown and living in another state. We talked on the phone once a week. We said "I love you" out of habit, hoping it still carried the same meaning. Most nights after work, I sat alone in my small apartment. The television was usually on, not because I cared about what was playing, but because silence made my thoughts too loud. Spiritually, I was confused. I believed in God, or at least I believed that believing was important. I had grown up in church. I knew the prayers, I knew the songs, I knew how to smile at the right moments. But somewhere along the way, my faith became quiet, muted by disappointment, unanswered prayers, and a constant question I was afraid to speak out loud. Does any of this really matter anymore? I still prayed, but my prayers were hesitant, careful, almost apologetic. At night, I would sit on the edge of my bed, hands folded, and whisper things like, "God, if you're still there, please don't forget about me." I didn't ask for miracles. I didn't ask for visions or signs. I asked for peace, for reassurance, for something, anything to tell me that the world wasn't spiraling out of control and that my small, unnoticed life wasn't meaningless. The world felt heavy back then. Everywhere I looked, there was anger, division, fear, people shouting past each other instead of listening, leaders arguing, families breaking, truth feeling negotiable. I remember thinking, more than once, if God wanted to speak to humanity, who would even listen anymore? Certainly not me. I was too tired, too unsure, too ordinary. Yet there were moments, small ones, that now feel important. A sudden wave of sadness while driving, for no clear reason. A strange urgency in my chest during prayer, like time was running out. Dreams I couldn't remember fully, but woke from with tears in my eyes. I ignored those moments. I told myself I was just stressed, overworked, emotional. Looking back now, I understand something I didn't then. My soul was being prepared. That morning, the morning everything changed, I woke up earlier than usual. The sky outside my window was gray, heavy with clouds. I sat on the bed longer than normal, staring at my hands, feeling an unexplainable weight in my chest. Before leaving for work, I prayed again. Not out loud, not formally, just one sentence. Jesus, if you're real, please help us. I didn't know who us was, the world, my son, myself, maybe all of it. I grabbed my keys, locked the door, and stepped into a day that would end my old life forever. And I had no idea that before the sunset, I would stand outside my body, face a light more alive than anything I had ever known, and be shown a future that made me beg to come back and warn others. The signs I didn't understand. Looking back now, the most unsettling part isn't what happened during my near-death experience. It's how many warnings came before it. At the time, I didn't call them signs. I called them stress, fatigue, anxiety, anything but what they truly were. In the weeks leading up to that day, my body and my spirit felt misaligned. I would wake up tired even after a full night's sleep. My chest felt heavy, not with pain, but with a kind of pressure, like something important was waiting to be acknowledged, and I was refusing to look at it. There were moments at work when everything around me seemed to slow down. I remember sitting at my desk, staring at my computer screen, when suddenly the office noises faded. The phones still rang, people still walked by. But for a few seconds, it felt like I was behind glass, watching life instead of living it. My heart would race for no reason. More than once, a coworker asked if I was okay. I smiled and said, "Just tired." That became my answer for everything. At night, the dreams started. They weren't dramatic or cinematic. No monsters, no disasters. Just feelings. I would dream of standing in a vast open space, unable to see the edges. There was no fear there, but there was urgency. A sense that something was approaching, something inevitable. I always woke up right before understanding what it was. And every time, my pillow was damp with tears. I didn't know why I was crying. One evening, about a week before the accident, I was driving home when a thought entered my mind so clearly it felt spoken, not imagined. "Get your heart ready." I gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. "Ready for what?" I whispered to the empty car. No answer came. Instead, a deep sadness washed over me. Grief for something I hadn't lost yet. Or maybe for something I was about to. I told myself I was being dramatic. I had always been practical, grounded, logical. I didn't believe in reading into things. I believed in schedules, responsibilities, and pushing through discomfort. But even my prayers began to change. They became shorter, more intense. I stopped asking for explanations and started asking for mercy. Please protect my son. Please help this world. Please forgive us. Forgive us for what? I didn't know. One night, unable to sleep, I opened my Bible for the first time in months. Not with a plan, not searching for a verse. I just opened it randomly. My eyes landed on words about watchfulness, about not knowing the hour, about being awake while others slept. I closed the book quickly, my heart pounding. "This is too much," I said out loud. I didn't want urgency. I didn't want responsibility. I didn't want to believe that something was coming that I wasn't prepared for. The morning before everything changed, my phone rang unusually early. It was my son. We hadn't planned to talk that day. "Mom," he said, "I don't know why, but I felt like I needed to call you." We talked about nothing important. Work, weather, ordinary things. But before hanging up, he said something that still echoes in my mind. "I love you. Just in case I forget to say it later." After we hung up, I sat on the edge of my bed and cried. I didn't know why. My body felt wrong that day. Not sick, just off. Like wearing clothes that don't quite fit. My balance felt slightly unsteady. My hands trembled when I poured my coffee. I considered calling in sick. I didn't. I told myself I was being irresponsible even thinking about it. I had deadlines. Meetings. A life to maintain. As I drove to work, the sky looked unusually dim for that time of day. Thick clouds pressed low, turning the world gray and flat. Traffic was heavier than usual. Every red light felt longer. At one intersection, I had a sudden, overwhelming urge to stop the car, put it in park, and pray. Not later, not silently. Right there. My heart pounded as if warning me. "Don't be ridiculous," I muttered. The light turned green. I pressed the accelerator. I didn't know that I had just ignored the last warning. I didn't know that within minutes, the body I trusted, the life I planned, and the future I assumed were guaranteed would all be stripped away in a single, irreversible moment. And I certainly didn't know that what waited on the other side of that moment would change how I saw leadership, power, faith, and the year 2026 forever. The day everything collapsed. That morning followed me like a shadow. Even after all the strange feelings, all the heaviness I couldn't explain, life insisted on pretending it was normal. The radio played softly in the background. Cars moved in steady lines. People rushed to places that felt suddenly unimportant to me, though I couldn't explain why. I arrived at work a few minutes early and sat in my car longer than usual, hands resting on the steering wheel, staring at the building in front of me. A quiet thought crossed my mind. You don't have to go in. It wasn't fear. It wasn't panic. It felt more like an invitation. I shook my head, grabbed my bag, and stepped out of the car. Inside the office, the fluorescent lights buzzed faintly. The air smelled like paper and coffee. Familiar, safe, predictable. I greeted coworkers, answered emails, reviewed schedules. I even laughed at a joke someone made near the copier. From the outside, nothing was wrong. Inside, everything felt fragile. Around mid-morning, a dull ache settled behind my eyes. Not a headache exactly, more like pressure. I stood up too quickly at one point and had to steady myself against my desk. "You okay?" someone asked. "Yeah," I said automatically. "Just need some air." I stepped outside into the parking lot. The clouds overhead seemed thicker now, darker, like they were pressing down on the world. A breeze moved through the trees, and for a moment, everything went quiet. That's when the fear finally arrived. It wasn't loud or dramatic. It was calm. A deep, unsettling calm that didn't belong to me. I whispered a prayer under my breath. "Jesus, please be with me." Those words had barely left my lips when my phone vibrated in my pocket. A notification. Nothing important. Still, the interruption broke something open inside me. My heart began to race. I remember thinking I should sit down, call someone, do something. Instead, I walked back inside. The rest of the morning blurred together. Time felt strange, stretching and compressing in ways I'd never experienced. At one point, I looked at the clock and realized an hour had passed without me remembering what I had done. Shortly after lunch, I was asked to drive a set of documents to a nearby facility. It was routine. I had done it dozens of times. As I walked to my car, that same thought returned. You don't have to go. This time my hands trembled. I paused, keys in hand, and closed my eyes. "God," I whispered, "if you're trying to tell me something, please make it clear." The silence that followed felt heavier than any answer. I got in the car. The road was familiar, but something felt wrong almost immediately. Sounds seemed muffled, colors dulled. My awareness narrowed, as if the world were slowly pulling away from me. At a red light, I felt a sudden wave of weakness pass through my body. My vision dimmed at the edges. I gripped the wheel, breathing slowly, telling myself it would pass. The light turned green. I pressed the accelerator. What happened next unfolded faster than my mind could process. There was a moment, a single, suspended instant, where everything slowed down. The sound of traffic faded. My thoughts stopped racing. I felt an overwhelming sense of separation, as if I were slipping out of alignment with the world. I remember thinking, this is it. There was no pain, no panic, just release. The physical sensations dissolved, like mist burning away in sunlight. The weight I had carried for years, worry, sadness, exhaustion, vanished all at once. And then, there was stillness. I became aware that I was no longer inside my body. I was above it. I saw my car, stopped at an awkward angle. I saw people rushing toward it. I heard distant voices, but they sounded far away, like echoes underwater. None of it felt like me anymore. I wasn't afraid. That's what shocked me most. I felt calm, clear, awake in a way I had never been before. I understood without words that my body had failed, but I had not ended. I was still me, more than me. I hovered there, watching the scene unfold with a strange tenderness, like observing a chapter of a book I had already finished reading. I felt no attachment to the body below, no urge to return, no regret, only curiosity. Then something began to draw me away. Not a force, not a pull, a calling. The world below faded, replaced by a sensation of movement, not through space, but through layers of awareness. It felt like passing through a veil, then another, then another. Each layer carried away something heavy: fear, doubt, identity tied to pain. What remained was lightness, clarity, peace. I realized with absolute certainty that I was crossing a boundary humanity talks about but rarely understands. I was not dying. I was waking up. And ahead of me, something waited. Something alive. Something intentional. Something that knew me completely and had always been there. The moment I let go. The transition was so gentle that at first I didn't realize it had fully happened. One moment I was aware of the scene below, my car, the movement, the distant concern of strangers. The next, all of that felt like a memory instead of a reality. Not forgotten, just no longer relevant. I wasn't floating upward the way people describe in movies. I wasn't traveling through a tunnel. It felt more like falling inward. Layers peeled away from me, not physically, but emotionally and spiritually. Every worry I had carried in life dissolved without effort. I didn't release them. They simply couldn't come with me. Fear was the first to go. Then regret. Then the constant mental noise I had lived with for years, the endless questioning, self-criticism, and quiet despair, faded into silence. I realized something astonishing. I had never been truly awake before. Awareness expanded in all directions at once. There was no up or down, no left or right. I existed as consciousness, clear, alert, whole. And then I understood. I was dead. Not as an idea, not as a theory, as a fact. And it was beautiful. There was no panic in that realization. No struggle to return. No instinct to cling to what I had left behind. Instead, I felt an overwhelming sense of relief, like setting down a burden I hadn't known I was carrying. I became aware of a presence, not beside me, not in front of me, but within and around me at the same time. It wasn't introduced. It didn't announce itself. I simply knew I wasn't alone. The environment around me wasn't darkness, but it also wasn't light in the way we understand it. It was a soft, living glow, warm, intelligent, responsive. The space felt aware of me, welcoming me, recognizing me, and for the first time in my existence, I felt completely known. Not judged, not evaluated, known. Every mistake I had ever made was visible, but not condemned. Every fear I had ever hidden was understood, but not exposed. It was as if my entire life had been gently unfolded and embraced at once. I didn't need words to communicate. Thought and understanding were the same thing. A realization moved through me with absolute clarity. You are safe. That safety wasn't conditional. It didn't depend on beliefs, achievements, or perfection. It simply was. I became aware of my body, or rather, the absence of it. I had no weight, no pain, no limitations. Movement was intention. Direction was desire. I didn't walk. I became closer. And with that closeness came emotion. Pure, unfiltered emotion that made anything I'd ever felt on earth seem like a faint echo. Love. Not romantic love. Not familial love. Something deeper. Stronger. More real. It was love without fear of loss. Love without demand. Love that didn't need to be earned. I realized then how starved humanity is for this feeling, and how unaware we are of it while we chase substitutes. A thought crossed my awareness, and it wasn't mine. This is what you were created for. Tears would have come if I'd had eyes. Instead, my entire being responded in gratitude. I sensed movement again, not traveling, but transitioning. The space around me shifted, opening like a curtain drawn aside. Ahead of me was a brilliance that felt alive, conscious, and purposeful. It didn't hurt to look at it. It healed. The closer I moved, the more I recognized it, not visually, but spiritually. This presence was ancient and immediate at the same time. Powerful beyond measure, yet infinitely gentle. I knew, without anyone telling me, I was approaching Jesus. Not the distant figure from stained glass windows or religious debates, not a symbol or a doctrine, a living presence. Before I could form a thought, an understanding flowed through me. You have nothing to fear here. Memories of my life surfaced, not as scenes, but as meanings. I saw how small moments had mattered, how quiet kindnesses had rippled outward, how pain I thought was meaningless had shaped compassion in ways I never noticed. I also saw where I had closed myself off, where fear had guided my choices, where silence had replaced courage. None of it came with shame, only truth. I felt myself slowing, as if reaching a threshold. Part of me knew this was not the final destination. This was an approach, an invitation to understand before being shown something greater. And in that sacred pause, one overwhelming realization settled into me. Death was not an ending. It was a return, a remembering. And as I prepared to encounter the presence fully, to see what waited beyond this threshold, I had no desire to go back. Not yet. Not ever. Watching life from the outside, awareness returned in layers. At first, I thought I was still moving forward, toward that presence, that living light. But then something shifted. My attention expanded outward instead of inward, like a breath taken in reverse. Suddenly, I was aware of two realities at once. One was vast, calm, and eternal. The other was loud, urgent, and temporary. I realized I was being shown something. Below me, though below isn't quite the right word, I saw the scene I had just left behind. The road, the stopped cars, the small cluster of people gathered with concern written across their faces. And there I was, my body. Seeing it without being in it was deeply unsettling, but not in the way I would have expected. There was no horror, no panic, no desperate need to return. Instead, I felt a strange compassion for that fragile form that had carried me for so long. It looked smaller than I remembered, less significant, like a coat I had outgrown. People moved around it quickly. Someone was on the phone, pacing. Another knelt nearby, speaking urgently, though I couldn't hear the words clearly. Sounds reached me as impressions, not noise. Muted, distant, unimportant. I noticed something surprising. I felt no pain, not physical, not emotional. I felt detached, but not disconnected. Aware, but not involved. Time behaved differently here. Moments on Earth felt stretched, slow, almost clumsy. I could observe without impatience, without anxiety. I realized then how much of human suffering comes from urgency, from the constant belief that everything must be fixed right now or it will be lost forever. Here, nothing felt lost. I became aware of thoughts, not mine, flowing gently through my awareness. Look carefully. I watched as emergency responders arrived. Their movements were efficient, practiced. I felt respect for them, but no attachment to the outcome. Whether my body lived or died felt secondary. That realization shocked me. On Earth, survival had always been everything. Here, it was simply one possibility among many. I sensed that I was being allowed to see this, not to judge it, but to understand the difference between existence and identity. I was not my body. I was not my job, my history, my mistakes, or even my relationships. Those things were experiences. I was something else entirely. As I observed the scene, another awareness grew stronger, the presence that had accompanied me since leaving my body. It didn't interrupt. It didn't rush me. It waited, patient, attentive, loving. I sensed a question forming, not spoken, but offered. Do you understand now? And I did. I understood how temporary everything below me was, how fragile, how brief. I understood how much energy humans spend protecting things that cannot last, while neglecting what is eternal within them. I watched as someone covered my body gently, an act of dignity and care. The sight stirred something like gratitude in me, but still, no grief. I realized grief belongs to those who remain. From where I was, nothing had been taken. I felt no pull toward unfinished business, no sudden regrets about words left unsaid or dreams unrealized. That surprised me too. Earthly life had felt so incomplete while I lived it, yet from here it appeared perfectly contained, whole, like a chapter that ended exactly where it was meant to. A new understanding settled into me. Nothing in your life is random, not the pain, not the waiting, not the silence you thought meant abandonment. Everything had shaped something within me that mattered far more than the events themselves. As I continued to observe, the scene below began to soften at the edges, like a picture losing focus. My attention was gently being drawn away. Before it faded completely, one final thought crossed my awareness. Clear, undeniable. This world is real, but it is not the ultimate reality. And with that realization came peace. Not resignation, but clarity. The scene dissolved. The sense of space around me expanded again, warmer and brighter than before. The earthly noise vanished completely, replaced by a depth of silence so rich it felt alive. I felt myself turning, not physically, but intentionally, toward the presence that had been waiting all along. The presence that knew my name before I had ever been given one. The presence that held both truth and mercy without contradiction. I knew what was coming next. I was about to encounter the light directly, and I understood with certainty that once I did, nothing I believed about life, power, or the future would ever be the same again. The peace that has no opposite. The light did not appear suddenly. It unfolded. It was as if the space around me was gently opening, revealing something that had always been there but patiently hidden, until I was ready to perceive it. There was no shock, no blinding intensity, no fear of being overwhelmed. Instead, there was recognition. Not recognition with my eyes, but with my soul. The light was not a thing. It was a presence. Alive, intelligent, intentional. It didn't shine on me. It shone through me. I realized then that light, in its truest form, is not about brightness. It is about truth without distortion, and the peace that came with it. There are no words in any human language that can fully capture it. This peace was not the absence of conflict. It was the absence of fear itself. On Earth, peace always felt fragile, conditional, temporary, something you had to protect from interruption. This peace had no opposite. Nothing could threaten it. Nothing could interrupt it. It simply was. I felt myself dissolving into it, not losing myself, but becoming more myself than I had ever been. Every fragment of anxiety I had carried in life evaporated instantly, like shadows vanishing when the sun rises. I understood something profound in that moment. Fear is not natural to the soul. It is learned, absorbed, carried unnecessarily. Here, it had no place. I felt joy, not excitement, not happiness, but a deep, steady joy that didn't fluctuate. It didn't spike or fade. It didn't depend on circumstances. It was rooted in being. And with that joy came understanding. Not information, not facts. Understanding. I understood why people hurt each other, why power corrupts, why love so often feels scarce on Earth. It isn't because humanity is evil. It's because humanity has forgotten who it is. That realization didn't come with disappointment. It came with compassion so vast it almost felt painful. Not in a hurting way, but in a stretching way. Like my capacity to love was being expanded beyond anything I thought possible. I became aware that the light was responding to me. Not reacting, responding. It knew every question I had ever asked, every doubt I had ever hidden, every moment I had felt unworthy or unseen. And none of it mattered here. Not because it was dismissed, but because it was already healed. I sensed communication, not spoken, not audible, but unmistakably clear. You have always been loved, not you are loved if, not you will be loved when. Always. Past tense, present tense, eternal tense. I felt myself wanting to move closer, but movement no longer felt necessary. Distance didn't exist here the way it does on Earth. Nearness was not spatial, it was relational. And I was already as close as I could be. I realized then that this peace was not something being given to me. It was something being revealed. It had been part of me all along, buried beneath layers of fear, identity, expectation, and survival. I saw how earthly life trains us to live in constant defense, guarding ourselves against loss, rejection, and pain. That defensive posture had followed me everywhere, until now. Here, there was nothing to defend against. No competition, no comparison, no scarcity. Love was not a limited resource. Truth was not something to argue about. Worth was not something to earn. The light felt patient, as if allowing me to absorb this reality at my own pace. There was no urgency, yet I sensed that time, as humans experience it, was irrelevant here. An awareness formed gently within me. This peace is what the world is searching for, but it is looking in the wrong places. People chase it through success, through control, through ideology, through leaders and systems and promises that can never sustain it. And when those things fail, as they always do, fear rushes back in. I felt a deep sorrow then. Not personal sadness, but grief for humanity, for how close we are to what we seek, and how rarely we turn inward enough to find it. The light seemed to intensify, not brighter but deeper, more present, more intentional. I sensed that this stage of the experience, the peace, the safety, the restoration, was not the destination. It was preparation, like a deep breath before speaking, like stillness before revelation. I understood that what I was about to be shown next would require this peace, because without it, the truth would be too heavy to carry. And yet, I felt no fear of what was coming, only readiness, only trust. I knew that soon the presence would reveal itself more fully, not just as light, but as identity, as intention, as truth made personal. I was about to understand who stood before me, and why I had been brought here, not just for myself, but for others. When the light spoke my name, the presence did not rush toward me. It didn't need to. Its nearness was not measured by distance, but by recognition. The light that surrounded me began to take on clarity, not a shape in the human sense, but an identity. It was as if the truth behind the light was gently stepping forward, allowing itself to be known. And then, without sound, without vibration, without language, I was called, not with a voice, but with meaning. Eleanor. My name did not feel like a label. It felt like a truth being spoken into existence. It carried everything I was, everything I had been, and everything I could become, all at once. I knew immediately who stood before me. This was Jesus, not the distant figure debated in arguments or reduced to symbols. This was presence with intention, love with authority, truth without cruelty. There was no fear in recognizing him, only relief. I understood in that instant why people fall to their knees, not out of obligation, but because nothing false can remain standing in his presence. Everything unnecessary simply falls away. I felt seen in a way I never had before. Every hidden thought, every quiet shame, every moment I had pretended to be stronger than I was. None of it was exposed harshly. It was understood completely. And for the first time in my existence, I realized something that made my awareness tremble. Not with fear, but with awe. I had never been alone. Not once. Not in my childhood doubts. Not in my failed marriage. Not in the lonely nights when I questioned if my prayers were reaching anything beyond the ceiling. He had been there, always. Not watching from a distance, but walking with me through every unseen moment. I wanted to speak, to apologize, to explain, to ask 1,000 questions. But words felt unnecessary. Understanding flowed directly between us. I understood that Jesus did not come to accuse. He came to restore alignment, to remind, to awaken. His presence carried authority, not the kind that demands submission, but the kind that reorders reality. Everything in me naturally aligned toward him, like a compass finding true north. I felt love, but not indulgent love. This love was honest. It saw who I was and who I was meant to be, without confusing the two. And then, he showed me something. Not immediately, not forcefully, like a teacher waiting until the student is ready. The light around us shifted, not dimming, not brightening, but widening. It was as if a window was opening into something vast. I sensed what was coming before I saw it. Truth. Not personal truth. Global truth. I felt an instinctive resistance rise in me. Not because I didn't want to see, but because I understood that once seen, it could never be unseen. And Jesus knew that. I felt his reassurance immediately. Not spoken, but absolute. You will not be shown more than you can carry. The scene began to form, not as images at first, but as states of being. I felt confusion, pride, fear, division. They weren't emotions I was feeling. They were emotions saturating humanity. Then I saw people, not individually at first, but collectively. Crowds moving without direction. Voices overlapping, shouting past one another. Each convinced they were right. Each certain the danger was external, never internal. I saw leadership, not names yet, just roles. Authority without wisdom. Influence driven by fear instead of responsibility. Power treated like a weapon instead of a burden. And over it all, urgency. Time felt compressed. I sensed a convergence, decisions stacking on top of decisions, creating momentum that would soon become impossible to stop. The year formed in my awareness clearly, deliberately, 2026. I didn't see dates on a calendar. I felt a threshold, a point where choices already made would begin to bear visible consequences. I felt my awareness strain under the weight of it. Why? I thought, not accusing, but aching. And the understanding came instantly. Because humanity listens when consequences arrive. I sensed sorrow, not disappointment, but grief. Not for what would be lost, but for what could have been avoided. I realized then that Jesus was not showing me a future to frighten me. He was showing me a future shaped by hearts, and hearts, I understood, could still change. I felt the focus narrowing. The vision was about to become more specific, more personal, more controversial. I sensed the weight of responsibility pressing into me, not as a command, but as a calling forming. And before the next revelation unfolded, I felt a clear, unmistakable truth settle into me. What I was about to see would not be received easily. Some would twist it, some would mock it, some would use it for their own agendas, but that was not my responsibility. My responsibility was only this: to tell the truth as I was shown it, with humility, with love, without fear. And then, the vision shifted again, and I knew I was about to see how leadership, power, and one man in particular would intersect with that coming year. When the world was shown as it truly is, the shift was subtle at first. The light did not disappear, nor did the presence of Jesus withdraw. Instead, it expanded, like a horizon pulling back to reveal how vast reality truly was. I sensed that what I was about to see was not a single event, not a fixed outcome, but a condition. The condition of the world. What appeared before me was not a map or a timeline. It was perspective. I saw humanity the way one might see a body from above, not individual cells, but systems, currents, and imbalances. I felt the emotional atmosphere of the planet like a pressure change in my awareness. Fear was everywhere, not fear as panic, but fear as motivation. I felt how decisions were being made, not from wisdom, not from patience, but from anxiety about losing control. Nations moved like anxious minds, reacting instead of discerning. Voices competed for attention, each claiming urgency, each demanding allegiance. And beneath all of it was noise. So much noise. Opinion shouted as truth. Certainty worn like armor. Humility treated as weakness. I felt sorrow rise in me, not judgment, not condemnation, but grief for how distorted things had become. Jesus allowed me to feel this, but not to be crushed by it. His presence anchored me, steady and calm, as if to say, "See clearly, but do not despair." I sensed the consequences of choices stacking upon one another, small compromises made daily, accumulating into movements that felt unstoppable. Truth bent for convenience, integrity traded for influence, responsibility avoided in favor of applause. And then I understood something that startled me. The greatest danger was not corruption, it was confusion. People no longer knew what to fear, or why. They feared each other. They feared change. They feared being wrong. But they no longer feared becoming disconnected from truth. I felt the weight of division, how easily people were separated into sides, identities, ideologies. How quickly compassion was replaced with suspicion. How rarely anyone paused to ask, "Is my heart clean in this?" The vision narrowed. Leadership came into focus. Not just political leadership, but cultural and moral leadership. Those who shape narratives. Those who influence millions without ever meeting them. I did not see villains. I saw pressure. Immense pressure. I saw leaders surrounded by voices, advisors, supporters, critics, all pulling in different directions. I felt the intoxicating pull of power, the way it convinces a person they must act quickly, decisively, forcefully, or risk losing relevance. And I felt how dangerous that urgency could become when it was not grounded in humility. The year emerged again in my awareness, unmistakable. 2026. It did not appear as a prophecy carved in stone. It appeared as a culmination, a season where trajectories converge. I understood that 2026 was not important because of a single event, but because it would reveal what had been forming quietly for years. The choices made before it would determine what kind of future followed it. I sensed unrest, not chaos, but tension. Like a stretched cord pulled too tight, economies, institutions, trust itself felt strained. People would look for strong voices, clear promises, simple answers. And that, I understood, was the danger. I felt Jesus' attention turn, not to condemn, not to alarm, but to warn. The understanding flowed into me gently but firmly. When fear chooses leaders, consequences follow. I sensed how easily hope could be misplaced, how quickly people could confuse confidence with wisdom, strength with righteousness, certainty with truth. The vision did not show destruction. it showed responsibility. Responsibility avoided, responsibility misused, responsibility misunderstood. And then, for the first time, a specific figure entered my awareness, not as an image, not as a personality, but as a symbol of influence. A man whose name carried weight, whose words moved markets and minds, whose decisions would echo far beyond himself. I felt no hatred attached to this awareness, no praise either, only gravity. I understood that this was not about one man's character. It was about the power placed in human hands and what happens when the heart is not aligned with truth. The message was clear. The problem is not who leads. The problem is why they are followed. I felt a deep ache then, for people seeking salvation from systems, from leaders, from movements, while neglecting the state of their own hearts. Jesus allowed me to feel this ache, but again, not to be overwhelmed. His presence steadied me. I understood that the purpose of this vision was not prediction, it was invitation. An invitation to examine motives, to slow down, to choose humility over urgency, to value truth over victory. I felt the vision beginning to recede, not because it was complete, but because I had been shown enough. As it faded, one final understanding remained, clear and undeniable. The future is shaped long before it arrives. And what humanity needs most before 2026 is not control, but repentance. Not louder voices, but quieter hearts. Not stronger leaders, but wiser followers. And then the light drew closer again. The warning had been given. Now came the question of what would be done with it. The warning about leadership and the year 2026. The light did not fade when the vision of the world receded. If anything, it felt closer, more personal. I sensed that what I had just seen was only the outer layer, the atmosphere, the symptoms. Now Jesus was drawing my awareness toward the cause beneath it all. I felt a gentle but firm shift, like being guided from a wide landscape into a narrow path. The understanding came clearly. Leadership reveals what hearts are already choosing. The year 2026 returned to my awareness again, not as a date to fear, but as a mirror. A moment when inner realities would become outwardly visible. When what had been hidden beneath language, slogans, and confidence would be exposed by consequences. I sensed that many people thought of the future as something that happens to them. But what I was being shown was different. The future was something being built, quietly, daily, through motivations no one was examining. Jesus allowed me to feel the weight of influence. Not just political influence, but cultural influence. The power to shape how people think, what they fear, and where they place their hope. And I felt how dangerous that power becomes when it is carried by unexamined hearts. I became aware of a particular focus forming, not a condemnation, not a judgment, but a responsibility. A man whose name already carried division, devotion, anger, and loyalty all at once. I did not hear his name spoken. I felt it. The understanding came without accusation. This is not about the man. This is about the role he occupies. I saw how easily people project their longings onto leaders, how they turn human beings into symbols of salvation or destruction, how they excuse what they would condemn in others simply because the person represents what they want to protect. And I felt Jesus' sorrow, not toward one individual, but toward the pattern itself. When I sensed the focus narrowing toward 2026, I understood something critical. That year would not create new hearts, it would reveal them. I saw moments of decision, not dramatic, not cinematic, but quiet choices made behind closed doors. Words spoken in private, advice accepted or rejected, truth bent slightly, then slightly more. I felt the temptation leaders face, the temptation to believe they are indispensable, to confuse attention with calling, to believe that urgency justifies anything. And I felt how easily followers participate in this distortion, by demanding certainty, by rewarding aggression, by punishing humility. The understanding pressed into me gently but firmly. When people demand strength without character, they will receive consequences without mercy. I sensed that many would look to 2026 hoping for rescue, hoping one voice, one figure, one movement would finally fix everything. But what I was being shown was sobering. No leader can save what hearts refuse to heal. I felt Jesus' presence steady me as the weight of this truth settled in. I understood that this was not a prophecy of doom. It was a warning of misplacement, hope misplaced in systems, faith misplaced in personalities, trust misplaced in confidence instead of wisdom. I sensed that decisions made around leadership in that season would echo far beyond politics, affecting families, communities, and the moral tone of an entire generation. And yet, there was still mercy. That surprised me. Even as consequences loomed, the atmosphere was not closed, not sealed, not inevitable. I felt Jesus' intent clearly. Warn them while there is still time to examine their hearts. The message sharpened, not harsh, but unmistakable. The danger is not choosing wrongly once. The danger is refusing to question why you choose at all. I realized then that this warning was not aimed at one side, one nation, or one ideology. It was aimed at human nature. Our desire for certainty in uncertain times, our craving for strong voices when we feel afraid, our tendency to surrender responsibility in exchange for reassurance. I felt grief, not because failure was guaranteed, but because wisdom was being ignored. And then came a moment that shook me. I sensed that Jesus was not only warning about leaders, but about followers, about how easily people surrender their moral discernment once they feel represented, how quickly they excuse lies when the lies feel useful. The understanding settled like a weight in my awareness. In 2026, many will be judged not by who they followed, but by what they were willing to overlook. That realization pierced me. I thought of my own life, the times I had stayed silent to avoid discomfort, the moments I had chosen peace over truth, safety over courage. I understood then that this warning applied to everyone, including me. As the focus on leadership began to soften, I felt Jesus drawing my attention inward again, not away from the world, but toward responsibility. The final understanding from this vision was clear. The future will not be decided by one man, but by millions of small, unseen choices, and those choices begin in the heart. The light around me grew warmer, closer. The warning had been given, not to frighten, but to awaken. And I sensed that what came next would be deeply personal. A question, a mission, and a decision I would not be allowed to avoid. The problem is not the man, but the heart. The light around us became still, not quieter, intentional. I sensed that everything I had been shown so far was leading to this moment. The visions, the warnings, the weight of 2026, the focus on leadership, all of it now folded inward, toward a single truth. Jesus did not speak in words, but the message was unmistakable. The problem is not the man. The problem is the heart. That understanding moved through me like a current. It wasn't an opinion. It wasn't a commentary on politics or personalities. It was a diagnosis of humanity's deepest wound. I understood then how often people search for someone to blame, someone visible, someone loud, someone powerful, because it's easier than looking inward. Blame feels productive. Self-examination feels threatening. Jesus allowed me to feel the difference. I saw how quickly people project their inner chaos onto external figures, how they pour unresolved fear, anger, and longing into leaders and expect them to carry it, how disappointment inevitably follows, because no human heart was meant to bear the weight of collective salvation. The understanding continued to unfold. When the heart is wounded, it looks for power. When the heart is afraid, it looks for certainty. When the heart is unhealed, it looks for someone else to fix what it refuses to face. I felt sorrow, not toward leaders, but toward followers, toward people who confuse agreement with righteousness, who confuse strength with wisdom, who confuse loyalty with truth. I realized how often humanity treats symptoms instead of causes. Change the leader, change the system, change the rules, but leave the heart untouched, and so the cycle repeats. Jesus showed me scenes, not visions, but patterns. Generations rising with hope, then falling into disillusionment. Movements beginning with ideals, then ending in control. Promises made loudly, then quietly abandoned. The common thread was always the same. The heart was never transformed. I felt an uncomfortable recognition then. I was not separate from this problem. I had participated in it, on a smaller scale perhaps, but no less real. The times I had avoided truth because it felt inconvenient. The times I had stayed silent because speaking felt risky. The moments I had chosen comfort over integrity. I realized something humbling. It is easy to criticize power. It is harder to surrender pride. The message pressed deeper, but it was not crushing. It was clarifying. Jesus was not removing responsibility from leaders. Far from it. But he was showing me that leaders reflect what people reward. If people reward outrage, they will receive division. If people reward confidence without character, they will receive consequences. If people reward fear, they will live in it. I sensed a question forming, not spoken aloud, but placed gently into my awareness. What kind of heart are you feeding? I understood then that this was not a message meant only for a specific nation or moment in history. It was timeless. Every era believes its crisis is unique, but the human heart has always needed healing. I felt Jesus' presence draw closer, not to comfort me, but to commission me. The understanding sharpened. If hearts do not change, the future cannot. No policy could replace repentance. No leader could substitute humility. No movement could heal what individuals refuse to examine. I felt the urgency then, not panic, but clarity. Time was not running out. Opportunity was. The year 2026 was not a countdown to catastrophe. It was a window, a moment when the consequences of unexamined hearts would become visible enough that people might finally ask deeper questions. But only if someone spoke the truth. Only if someone was willing to say, "This isn't about them, it's about us." I felt resistance rise in me. Who was I to carry this message? Why me? Why not someone louder, braver, more confident? The answer came instantly. Because you know what it is to be quiet, and truth does not need volume, it needs sincerity. That realization stunned me. Jesus was not looking for influence. He was looking for obedience. I felt my old fears resurface. The fear of being dismissed, misunderstood, attacked. The fear of being labeled or misused. And again, the reassurance came. Not removing the difficulty, but reframing it. You are responsible for faithfulness, not reception. I understood then that my task was not to convince. It was to witness. To speak what I had seen without distortion. To refuse to weaponize the message. To keep love at the center, even when truth was uncomfortable. The final understanding from this moment settled deeply into me. If the heart changes, everything changes. If the heart remains untouched, nothing truly does. The light around us pulsed gently, as if acknowledging the weight of what had been entrusted to me. I sensed that the encounter was nearing a turning point. Soon, I would be asked to return. And when I did, nothing about my life would be allowed to remain the same. The mission I never asked for. I thought the hardest part would be returning to my body. I was wrong. The hardest part was realizing that I wouldn't be allowed to stay. The light around Jesus remained steady, but I sensed a shift, subtle, deliberate. Not an ending, but a turning point. Like a conversation reaching the moment where action must follow understanding. I felt it before it was made clear. A knowing settled into me, heavy and undeniable. You are going back. The realization sent a wave through my awareness. Not fear, not anger, but grief. A deep, aching sorrow at the thought of leaving this peace, this clarity, this truth that felt more real than anything I had ever known. I did not want to return. Not because I hated life, but because I finally understood it. Here, there was no confusion, no division, no pretending. Everything was aligned. Everything made sense. The thought of going back into a world of noise, misunderstanding, and constant striving felt unbearable. I felt my resistance rise, honest and unfiltered. Please, I thought, let me stay. The response did not come as a refusal. It came as compassion. Jesus' presence did not withdraw. It leaned closer. Not physically, but relationally. I felt seen not as a servant being commanded, but as a soul being entrusted. The understanding flowed gently but firmly. What you have seen is not only for you. I felt the weight of that truth settle into me. I understood then that revelation always carries responsibility. Truth is never shown just to comfort. It is shown to be carried forward. I sensed my life unfolding before me, not as memories, but as potential paths. I saw moments I had dismissed as insignificant. My quiet nature, my tendency to listen more than speak, my discomfort with attention. What I had once considered weaknesses were now being reframed as preparation. I felt overwhelmed. Why me? Why someone so ordinary? Why someone who avoided conflict and hated being misunderstood? The answer came clearly, because the message is not about you. I realized then how easily ego attaches itself to spiritual experiences, how quickly people confuse being chosen with being elevated. This was not elevation, this was assignment. I felt the fear begin to surface, not fear of death, but fear of life. Fear of returning to a body that felt heavy and limited. Fear of speaking a message that would be questioned, doubted, twisted. Fear of being labeled. Fear of being reduced to headlines instead of heard with discernment. I sensed Jesus' awareness of all of it, and the reassurance came, not removing the fear, but redefining it. You will not be responsible for how others use what you share. That mattered more than I realized. I understood that once the message entered the world, people would project onto it. Some would sensationalize it. Some would mock it. Some would weaponize it for their own agendas. That was inevitable. But it was not my burden. My responsibility was faithfulness, not control. I felt a question form within me, not spoken aloud, but undeniable. Are you willing? It was not a demand. It was an invitation. And that made it harder. If I said no, I sensed that the world would continue on its path regardless. Truth does not depend on one messenger, but I also sensed that my life would never be the same if I refused. I felt the weight of choice, real choice. I thought of my son, of the people who felt unseen, of those who sensed something was wrong with the world but couldn't name it. I thought of myself, the woman I had been before this moment, quiet, doubting, searching, and I understood something deeply humbling. If someone like me could be reached, then so could anyone. I felt my resistance soften, not disappear, but surrender. I don't know how to do this, I thought. The response was immediate. You are not asked to know how, only to be honest. That broke something open in me. I realized then that the message was not meant to be delivered with confidence, but with humility. Not with certainty, but with sincerity. I would not be sent back as an authority. I would be sent back as a witness. That distinction mattered. I felt the nearness of earth begin to press in, faint at first, like a distant echo. Sensation I hadn't noticed before began to return at the edges of my awareness. Weight, density, limitation. I felt sorrow then, deep and sharp. Leaving this place felt like leaving home. Jesus' presence remained steady as the transition approached. One final understanding was placed gently into me. Do not focus on what people argue about. Focus on what awakens hearts. I knew then that my mission was not to predict dates or name outcomes. It was to redirect attention inward. To remind people that the greatest danger is not what happens in the world, but what happens when hearts remain unchanged. As the pull toward return strengthened, I felt one last wave of love, so complete, so affirming, that it felt like a seal placed upon my being. And with it came reassurance. You will not walk this path alone. The light began to recede, not disappearing, but withdrawing in the way a teacher steps back so the student can walk forward. I felt the world rushing toward me again. The peace began to fade, and I knew, once I opened my eyes, the mission would begin, whether I felt ready or not. Returning to a body that felt too small. The return did not feel like waking up. It felt like being compressed. One moment I existed without edges, without weight, without pain, without effort. The next, sensation rushed toward me all at once, chaotic and overwhelming, like being forced back into a space that could no longer contain who I had become. The first thing I felt was heaviness, not emotional heaviness, physical. It was as if gravity itself had intensified. Every part of me felt dense, restricted, slow. Awareness that once moved effortlessly now had to push through resistance. Then came sound. Muffled at first, distorted, too loud and too far away at the same time. I felt something pressing against my chest, a rhythm that was not my own, but had become mine again. Breath returned, not gently, but urgently, like a demand. My body pulled me back whether I was ready or not. Pain followed, not sharp, not violent, but overwhelming in its totality. Every nerve seemed to report at once, as if shocked by the sudden return to limitation. I wanted to pull away. Every part of me resisted. I remember a thought forming. Clear, desperate, unfiltered. No. Please. Not because I was afraid to live, but because I had finally understood what living truly was. And this felt like exile. I became dimly aware of voices. Urgent. Focused. Human. They felt distant and strangely irrelevant, like echoes from a dream I no longer belonged to. Hands touched my arms, my shoulders, my face. I wanted to tell them I was fine, that I had been somewhere beautiful, that they didn't need to worry. But language felt impossible. Words belonged to the body, and my body was struggling just to exist. When my eyes finally opened, light stabbed instead of healed. Shapes were harsh, colors too sharp. The world felt aggressive, not because it was cruel, but because I had lost my tolerance for distortion. Tears came without warning, not from pain, from grief. I remember someone saying my name, over and over, as if anchoring me to this reality. But the name felt foreign. I had just been more than that name. I had just been more than a body. And now I was reduced. That sounds ungrateful. I know that. But it was the truth. I felt like someone who had tasted something infinite and was now being asked to survive on crumbs. The hours that followed blurred together. Hospital lights, questions, machines, explanations that sounded reasonable but felt incomplete. They said my body had shut down briefly. They said I was lucky. They said I would recover. No one asked where I had been, and I didn't know how to tell them. Physically, I healed faster than expected. Emotionally, I didn't heal at all. In the days after, I felt displaced. Not depressed, not confused, displaced. Like a foreigner in my own life. The world felt unbearably loud. Conversations felt shallow. Not because people were insincere, but because they were focused on things that suddenly felt insignificant. Deadlines, arguments, opinions shouted with certainty. I wanted to scream sometimes, not in anger, but in sorrow. You don't know how much more there is. Sleep became difficult. When I closed my eyes, I didn't see visions, but I felt longing, a deep ache for the peace I had left behind, for the clarity, for the presence that had made everything make sense. I found myself grieving, not my near-death experience, but my return. That was confusing. People congratulated me on surviving. I felt like I had lost something precious. Guilt followed. How could I feel this way when I had been given more time? More breath? More opportunity? But grief does not ask permission. It arrives when something real is taken away, and something real had been taken from me. I struggled with my body. It felt fragile, clumsy, unreliable. I became acutely aware of pain, my own and others. Suffering felt louder now, more intrusive, harder to ignore, and yet, something else had changed too. Fear was gone, not reduced, gone. I noticed it one morning while driving. A car swerved suddenly in front of me. My body reacted, but my mind did not spiral. There was no panic. No imagining worst-case scenarios, just presence. I realized then that whatever had happened to me had altered something fundamental. Death no longer threatened me. It didn't feel like an enemy anymore. It felt like a doorway I had already stepped through once. That knowledge didn't make me reckless. It made me honest. I stopped pretending to care about things I didn't. Stopped agreeing just to keep peace. Stopped measuring my worth by productivity or approval. At the same time, I felt the weight of the mission pressing in. I had been shown something, and now I was carrying it alone. That was harder than I expected. There were moments I questioned my sanity. Moments I wondered if my mind had invented everything to cope with trauma. But then, quietly, gently, the truth would surface again. Not as images, not as voices, as alignment, as a deep inner knowing that refused to go away. I knew what I had experienced was real, not because it was extraordinary, but because it had changed me in ways I couldn't reverse. The hardest part of returning was not the pain, it was the patience. Waiting for the right moment to speak, learning how to share without sensationalizing, holding truth without forcing it. I understood then why so many who have experiences like mine struggle afterward. Because once you've touched eternity, time feels unbearably slow. And yet, This slowness was part of the assignment. I had been sent back not to escape the world, but to walk through it differently, to live as someone who knows what waits beyond fear, and to speak when the time came, not loudly, but truthfully. Why you were meant to hear this now. For a long time after I returned, I stayed silent, not because I forgot what I had seen, but because I was afraid of saying it wrong. I was afraid my words would cheapen something sacred, afraid people would turn it into spectacle, afraid the message would be twisted into fear instead of awakening. So I waited. And in that waiting, I learned something essential. Silence can be obedience for a season, but not forever. There came a moment when staying quiet began to feel heavier than speaking. A moment when the responsibility I carried pressed harder than the fear of being misunderstood. That is why I am telling you this now. Not because I want attention, not because I claim authority, but because the message itself refuses to remain hidden. What I was shown was never meant to create panic. It was meant to create clarity. The world feels unstable right now, not because everything is collapsing, but because much of what we trusted was never as solid as we thought. Institutions shake. Voices grow louder. Fear spreads faster than wisdom. And in moments like this, people look outward. They look for leaders, for movements, for certainty. But what I was shown, what I cannot escape, is this. The future will not be healed by louder voices. It will be healed by quieter hearts. The year 2026 is not a deadline carved in stone. It is a mirror. A moment when the direction humanity has been moving will become impossible to ignore. When choices made in fear reveal their cost. When integrity, or the lack of it, becomes visible. But here is the part people miss. Nothing I saw was inevitable. Not one outcome. What determines what comes next is not who holds power, but who holds discernment. You, me, all of us. I was not sent back to warn about one man, one nation, or one event. I was sent back to say this: stop outsourcing your responsibility to think, pray, and discern. Stop confusing confidence with truth. Stop letting fear choose for you. Because when fear chooses, consequences follow. But when humility chooses, everything changes. Since returning, my life has not become easier, but it has become clearer. I no longer chase certainty. I seek alignment. I no longer ask who will save us. I ask who we are becoming. I no longer fear death, but I deeply respect how we live. And that is why I believe you are hearing this now. Not by accident, not by algorithm alone, but because something in you recognizes this tension too. You feel that something is off in the world. You sense that louder arguments are not producing deeper truth. You know, deep down, that fear has been given too much authority. This is your invitation, not to panic, not to pick sides more aggressively, but to slow down, to examine your heart, to ask yourself questions that don't trend, but transform. Why do I believe what I believe? What am I willing to excuse to feel safe? Do I seek truth or reassurance? Because the most dangerous thing about the future is not instability. It is unexamined certainty. Jesus did not show me a future to frighten me. He showed me a responsibility to awaken others. And now, that responsibility passes, gently, respectfully, to you. You do not need to agree with everything I've said, but I ask you this: do not dismiss it without reflection. Sit with it. Pray on it. Question your motivations, not just your opponents. Because if hearts change, families change, communities change, nations change. And the future that unfolds after 2026 does not have to be shaped by fear. It can be shaped by wisdom, by humility, by courage that does not shout, but stands firm. If this message stirred something in you, unease, hope, conviction, or even resistance, that matters. Write in the comments. What part of this spoke to you the most? Do you think the world needs louder leaders or wiser hearts? Are you willing to examine your own heart before judging others? Your words may awaken someone else who is silently searching. And if you feel that this message is important, if you believe conversations like this need space to exist, subscribe to the channel. Not for me, but so these messages don't disappear under noise. Share this video with someone who feels the tension of our times but doesn't yet have words for it. Because the future is not decided by those who shout the loudest, but by those who choose truth when fear would be easier. Thank you for listening. Thank you for reflecting. And thank you for being willing to wake up.